I am in no way a therapist or an expert. I'm just a filmmaker. There are so many wonderful resources online, yours included, that break this down in an intelligent way, in a productive way, in a helpful way. I think the role of fiction is often helpful to just nudge someone in the right direction to maybe take a Wikipedia deep dive or connect with people that are actually doing therapy work and psychological work. Yes, it's aimed at validating folks that have OCD, but it's also aimed at people that don't have OCD that might walk away going, oh, that's a more common thing than I realize.
Welcome to OCD Whisperer Show. Today with me, I have Peter Kennan, who's a young writer and director that graduated Emerson College in 2015 and cut his teeth into independent film production. He has directed shorts, commercials, virtual reality experiences, all leading up to his debut feature film, Exposure. He believes that entertainment doesn't need to be sacrificed for story and that the strongest messages can be found in the DNA of the genre films. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, so I have to say this movie, and we chatted just right before starting to record, is really cool and amazing because the name of the movie is Exposure. This is the OCD Whisperers podcast, so people know I talk about all things OCD, and here we're going to be talking about a film that has to do with this topic. So I guess one of the first questions I'm pretty sure anybody right now listening would have is, what prompted you to make this film focusing on the OCD experience?
I have been experiencing OCD personally for a little over a decade. And as I went through this kind of whole process of, I saw many different therapists, tried many different medications, I didn't see a whole lot of representation of what OCD was, at least from where I was sitting in the media. A lot of the examples I've seen of OCD, I guess long before all this, was like Jack Nicholson in As Good as It Gets, or Monk, or anything like that. And that's not to say, at least from my perspective, that those representations are wrong. It's more the idea that is a narrower definition. And as you and probably a lot of people listening know, there are so many different themes and nuances and after effects and lifestyle changes and ways of handling it, the right and wrong ways of handling it. Those movies just haven't covered in my eyes. This isn't the first time I've made anything about mental illness before. I did something similar for my thesis project in college, but one thing I do know is my own personal experience with OCD. At the same time, wanted to make sure that we did this, so to speak. So I hired a therapist, thankfully not my own, to read the script and make sure that there's like the proverbial thumbs up of, yeah, this, like an OCD specialist. Actually, no, this was a therapist that usually does this for TV and film. So if you'll see some kind of representation, generally speaking, it's good practice to put it through a therapist reading it to give you the thumbs up. And that's what happened. So yeah, we got to work, and happy to say the people that have seen it have given a good response so far, which is encouraging. I don't know if you've ever watched this show called BoJack Horseman. This is a bit of a tangent, but there's an episode where a character wanted to write about her childhood. And towards the end of the episode, she's, I need to be able to write about this, because if I don't write about this damage, then it isn't good damage. It's just damage. Did I feel the need to put this all down in paper just to make these last over 10 years mean something? I don't know, but I'm happy I did it.
That's awesome. Yeah. As you're talking, first of all, there's a lot there, and thank you for sharing all that. I think, first of all, it's a really big endeavor to take on. I love the artistic, creative process and work, whether it's writing or creating something through the format of a video and a storyline. There's a lot of pieces, right, that go into putting something like this together. So it is not a small accomplishment. And you're right in terms of the media. The reality is there's a lot of, not a lot, but the handful of things we see really don't quite cover the kind of the essence of what it's like to be with OCD, and especially when things get really severe. We're not talking about when things are more mild and you can go through your life, but really when things get really difficult and you really get locked in. I guess with that, what do you hope to achieve with this film for the audience or for people? What are you wanting them to walk away with? Yeah.
I would say a couple different things. This movie has First off, stuff for folks with OCD, just a validation that maybe I could have used earlier on. That, yeah, this specific theme is like, you are not the only person feeling this, because you are not the only person. You are the only person feeling this is what made me shut up about it for as long as I did. And on the other side of things, I wanted to make other people aware that these things, there were these themes exist, and that, as I'm sure you've had this podcast for a while, I've listened to a lot of the episodes, you speak about some pretty hot topics in terms of themes, and people that don't have OCD, they react strongly to some things, and there's certain stigmas that prevent people from talking about it. So I wanted to just nudge the average person in the direction of, hey, listen, this is more about a thought process rather than it is about the content might be shocking, that the content might be out there, the content might be silly. I say this over and over again. I am in no way a therapist or an expert. I'm just a filmmaker. There are so many wonderful resources online, yours included, that break this down in an intelligent way, in a productive way, in a helpful way. I think the role of fiction is often helpful to just nudge someone in the right direction to maybe take a Wikipedia deep dive or connect with people that are actually doing therapy work and psychological work. Yes, it's aimed at validating folks that have OCD, but it's also aimed at people that don't have OCD that might walk away going, oh, that's a more common thing than I realize.
I think that's actually a pretty important point you just made, which is the people who have OCD, once they learn and understand it's OCD, they can start to grasp what's happening. But for folks who don't have OCD, you're exactly right. They may focus too much on the content, which might appear shocking, but not understand that this is part of kind of how people's brain with OCD in some areas doesn't quite work as well as it should in terms of filtering things out, that people without OCD are able to filter automatically and organically and not think twice about things. And so it's great to hear that this film is also aimed at that, to help people understand that process better. And also to understand, like you said, that some of these things are actually common. People do have random stuff that pops in. They just don't spend much time there. So they might not even really put it to memory a lot of times. Versus somebody with OCD, well, everything will suddenly stop and hyper focus on why is this there? What does this mean? And so on. If people are going to watch this film and people with OCD or without OCD, what would be the kind of, and I know this is going to be a tough one, but what would be like the message, right? The one thing you'd want to give your audience?
This is actually the easiest question.
Great.
No, because that's usually how I write anyway. I'm like, okay, what do I want to say with this movie? Because I have OCD is not a thesis of a movie. The concept of OCD is a thing that can be explained in a story, but at the beginning of every story writing process, and there's different schools of thought on this, but you should really figure out what kind of human truth you want to say that really everyone should be able to walk away with, and not just people with OCD. And thankfully, everyone can understand fear. Everyone can understand facing fear. Everyone can understand the ultimate goal of what this movie is. What's interesting about people with OCD is that their goal is like the stakes seem to be ramped up. How do I put this the right way? I'm trying to pick my words carefully here because I also don't want to, this is one of the first times I've done this kind of podcast, but the thesis of the movie is that a lot of folks with OCD have to face the fact that their worst fears could actually, there's some non-zero chance of that actually happening. And to be alive is to accept those non-zero chances. And that is something that is so blindingly hard for someone with OCD to face, because that's the final boss. That's the big mountain to climb. But the idea that you have to live with a non-zero chance of your worst fear happening also applies to regular people. Yeah, you have to cross the street knowing that people do get hit by cars. There are times where, yeah, if you go to a big crowded area, you might get sick because there are germs flying around everywhere. It is a message that really resounds with folks that are in the middle of various types of OCD therapy, whether it's CBT, ERP, or what have you. But it's also something that not regular, but people without OCD can wrap their heads around.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that's exactly right. Like we say, like life literally is one big exposure, if we want to look at it that way, because we all assume a lot of things as we go through it, but we all also understand cognitively that We have some degree of certainty we all agreed upon, but there's so many other variables we really don't have control over. And we all just embrace that and move on with life. And understanding that versus where is it that the really pathological doubt process starts, the obsessional doubt process starts, and then suddenly we're in a whole different place and we get really wrapped up in our heads and we start to envision and see a lot of really catastrophic, horrible things that just seem insurmountable and impossible to have to sit and tolerate and be present with or to, right?
And it's the great irony. It's the great irony that is so much more ruinous to someone's life than accepting a non-zero chance of a catastrophe. And I'm not going to give too much away with the movie, but a lot of the movie has to do with the ripple effects of this person's OCD to his wife, who at the beginning of the movie has fallen into these behaviors of, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that everything like you're safe with me. And I'm just going to keep repeating that to you no matter how many times you need to hear it, because that's what she thinks she has to do. It's the beginning of the movie. They haven't learned anything yet. During that time, you see this character, our main character's wife, just lose out on life opportunity after life opportunity because she's home taking care of her mentally ill husband. It's tragic, but that's what starts the stakes of the movie, where in the film, where I'm not going to give too much away, but something that makes his obsession seem more both real to him and the viewer, happens. He says, if this goes on, I'm clearly going to lose my wife. So that forces his hand to start this, to go to this exposure response prevention kind of ragtag group. And he doesn't totally believe in it at first. He's doing it just to performatively to appease her, to make it look like he's trying, but then it starts to work. And then the movie takes off from there. And we get into a lot of thrillery aspects of it. But one thing I wanted to carry along with the film is that obsession doesn't just bring you down, but it can bring the people around you down. That's something I feel like a lot of us can relate to.
I'll be honest, as you were speaking, I was like getting some physical sensation stuff. Oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly on point in terms of showing that exactly. It's not like OCD, it's just a you issue. It's actually your whole environment issue, whether it's kids, a loved one, even best friends, spouses, parents, whoever it is, brothers, sisters, etc. But that it really impacts the whole environment and the relationships. And it doesn't just take you down, but it starts to really, again, absorb the other people around you who, of course, unwittingly, they just want to help and they're doing what typically does work. If someone doesn't feel good, we typically want to give some reassurance. And usually when we do that and we talk things through a little bit, we can arrive to a point of clarity and, okay, thank you for that. And we move on. And here, part of what we learn in OCD, and I talk a lot about on my podcast shows, is everything in OCD is counterintuitive. It's like this upside down world. And the very things that typically, right, should solve things and make you feel better aren't working. They actually make you go deeper into it and they make everything worse, which is just such a, like you said, it's ironic. It's such a paradox in terms of how it works and learning that. And I think it's awesome to hear that that this film is actually really showing this other side of things and how it impacts, it sounds like, the spouse, the wife.
Because how is she supposed to know that? And there's some other stuff that kind of suggests that, like, not to throw a bunch of ramblings into it, but like if there were more accessible mental health care, a lot of this movie wouldn't happen. If there were ways in which this guy could have gotten the proper treatment ahead of time, that it may not have gotten to this level. And there's a lot of stuff in the movie that shows some failures of American healthcare. I will also say that it touches on some other things. It touches on, again, not trying to give too much away. It touches on some parallels between OCD and drug abuse. It touches on I'm not going to say causation, but correlation between trauma and OCD and how it relates with PTSD. These aren't things that necessarily take front and center, but the idea as you either get older or have certain traumatic experiences, or you just go through puberty, like obsessive compulsive disorder can just show up in different ways. And then also just, it touches on a few different of the more common themes and talks about the difference between the sexual orientation obsession and how a lot of people can immediately perceive it to be homophobia, and the sort of the uncomfortable conversations that kind of stem from that. Sometimes there's a few different characters that kind of talk about this kind of stuff, and we have some more uncomfortable moments. And at the same time, I hope it's thrilling to people. I think it's a suspense movie. The few people I've shown it to have been, as I said, they didn't expect it to ramp up that much. Oh, I was only going to watch the first half tonight and the next half tomorrow. And they say, yeah, I watched the whole thing last night.
Yeah, there you go. It's keeping that attention, but you're hitting on a lot of points. And I think, again, really important and great, because part of my mission with this show has been to talk about all things OCD. And that really means these extra nuances that a lot of times you can miss. And if I've been open myself, I have OCD, and partially when I first started specializing in this niche, it was incredible the amount of things that started to make sense. I'm like, oh my God, wait, what's happening? Why do I know this so well? And then to really have that moment of complete clarity of, oh my gosh. And so many people have that experience where some things like contamination might be more commonly known, but there's so many other topics that are not, right? That's one of them, right? We have relationship OCD is another one of them. We have people who, because it's a doubting disorder, may even doubt, is this really? Nah, it's not. And they'll push it away. And then, yes, absolutely. People can, and I've definitely worked with several clients where substances are part of a way of, coping mechanism, because you don't know what's happening. So, I'm good. That's what I'm going to do, because that's the best I have right now to get through whatever the heck is going on inside that I can't seem to grab a hold of. And then all the other elements with the family members, or, the fact that sometimes, we have trauma in life, period, right? We have what I would say difficult experiences in life that are part of being alive. Then we have things that are like trauma, and then we have big T trauma, right? And abuse, and also all sorts of other things. So there's kind of layers in a spectrum. And also with OCD, even the way that it shows up and the things you do, sometimes out of that experience, there can be a traumatic experience, right? Because there could be
other way, OC first
right.
and then trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can really go in these different combination of ways, right? It's like I've always said to people, you can have severe OCD without having had a big traumatic event, but you also can have like full on PTSD diagnosis. And then that really triggers the OCD to come out. So there can be any combination of ways that these things can interrelate. But I definitely have to say, I've not yet heard of a movie that tackles like all those different elements, because those are all true. People know that. People think more and more talking about it, but yeah, just haven't quite seen it represented yet, right? We always see things like touching, tapping, wiping, aligning, color coding. That's kind of the extent.
There are some physical rituals in the film, but a lot of the rituals are mental. Again, without giving too much away, I feel as though the issue with what the pure O, quote unquote, varieties of OCD with mental compulsions, there's some kind of doubt for an audience member that's watching a thriller movie that they're going to say, okay, but I'm watching a movie that's a thriller movie. What if it is not in his head? Because that's, for someone not with OCD that's watching a thriller movie, thrillers pull this stuff all the time. And then suddenly, if you're questioning yourself constantly throughout this whole movie, hey, what does that sound like?
There you go. Yep. Amazing. I want to say thank you so much for your time, for coming on here, for talking to us about this. So anybody listening, first of all, obviously, they're going to want to know, where can I get this movie? Where can I see it? And how can they find you if they'd like to reach out?
You cannot find this movie anywhere yet, actually. It is going through a very complicated process of film festivals and whatnot. And there's all kinds of fun stuff going on in the entertainment industry that makes everything pretty hard right now. I will also say, though, if you want to follow for updates on the film and little clips of it here and there, you can go onto Instagram and go on to @exposure_movie. We have a Twitter that I haven't touched, the artist formerly known as Twitter. I haven't touched it in a while, but who knows? Maybe I'll bring it back. But yeah, that's the main source of communication right now. You can also go to discomfortsthepoint.com for some extra clips of the movie and information about the cast and the crew and whatnot. And just keep your eyes out.
I love it. Thank you so much for giving us a sneak peek and a preview.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.